Well, good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960M. I'm very interested, obviously, in politics and wanted to interview a couple of the candidates for leader of the Green Party of Canada. Elizabeth May, as you probably know, has announced her resignation. She's actually stepped down as leader. She's only the parliamentary leader of the Green Party now. And my first candidate to be interviewed is David Murner. He's got really quite a impressive background. He graduated from Harvard College, University of Alberta, Oxford University, University of Toronto, called to the bar in both British Columbia and Ontario, advised ministers of justice in Ottawa for 15 years before moving back to BC to work on the justice system. Then he spent 30 years working for the Liberal Party of Canada, ran for the Liberals in Vancouver, and then decided to join the Green Party. And we're going to talk to him about why he decided to join the Green Party. It's got, I think, something to do with the Kinder Morgan pipeline. Ran in the last election, has worked on numerous successful elections before. The first unsuccessful election was his own in the last election. And now he's running for the Green Party. So, David, how are you? Welcome to my show.
Thank you very much for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it. It's great to be on your show.
That's quite the career, quite the resume.
Thank you. I've been very, very fortunate in my life. I've been just so fortunate to have parents who, were supportive, and to be born in Canada. I'm a really privileged person, and I totally recognize it.
So why did you quit the Liberal Party?
It was a sense of serious disappointment. Like you said, I started at University of Alberta supporting the Liberals. My first campaign was in '84, which was not an easy campaign in Alberta after the National Energy Program. I was a long-time Liberal, really believed in, the Pierre Trudeau vision and, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and all that great stuff, equality. But, in 2015, I ran as a candidate and we had a fantastic platform. Remember the slogan, Real Change? And remember those promises, 2015 will be the last first past the post election, right? That was said by Justin Trudeau, our leader, 1,000 times in that campaign. Somebody did a count. But then, shortly after the campaign, we started breaking promise after promise. And as a Liberal at the time, I just couldn't believe it. That electoral reform promise was broken within the first year. And they adopted Stephen Harper's greenhouse gas reduction targets. Remember, after criticizing them for years, they went and adopted the same targets, very low targets. And they're failing to meet even those Stephen Harper greenhouse gas reduction targets. So it was really promise after promise being broken. I just couldn't, in good faith, continue as a Liberal. The straw that broke the camel's back was when they went and purchased the Kinder Morgan pipeline. That was the day I joined the Greens, like you said earlier. Trudeau came to my campaign office and he said very clearly, we'll review this pipeline decision. Sure enough, they didn't review it properly. The federal court told them to go back and review it. So long story short, I was just tired of the broken promises. And I felt that the Greens had more integrity. And I haven't looked back ever since. I really believe that the Greens are the party of ethics and integrity. And even though we don't win as many seats as the Liberals yet, at least you can feel good at night, and going to bed, get up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and you feel happy to be Green.
I was surprised looking at your website that the policies are all non-environmental that you have as your three key policies. Why are you running for a Green Party leader when you're talking primarily about ethics and diversity and things like that?
I think it's about the audience. What drives me a lot is green values, but a lot of Canadians care about other things. Like, I think they really care about ethics and integrity. And a lot of Liberals can see that, boy, Justin Trudeau, he's now in the middle of his third review by the Ethics Commissioner, Mario Dion in Ottawa. He's been found to have broken the law, the Conflict of Interest Act, twice already. And now he's in the third one with this, the latest WE scandal. And you think, boy, Canadians at some point, especially Liberals, are going to get tired of this kind of leadership. They're going to say, we need a different kind of leadership. We need a leader who respects the Conflict of Interest Act. We need a leader who doesn't consistently get himself into trouble. It's time for a change. And the special thing about the Greens, and this is borne out in the polling, Brian, Canadians see us as a party that's really been consistent on the environment, that's been consistent on ethics and integrity. And I think in the next election, if we run on that as one of our key issues, we're going to win a lot of seats.
Given the first by the post electoral system that we've got, not vote by popular vote, Have the Greens got any chance?
You know, we do in certain key ridings, we do. And what we need to do, I believe, is break through in key ridings and then also build our popular vote across 338 ridings in Canada. If we do both those things, we can break through. We saw that with Mike Schreiner in Ontario. He won in Guelph, right? People weren't expecting a breakthrough there, but it's a university town. You know, he campaigned there for 3 elections already, and he had a fantastic ground game. As you know, that's all about knocking on doors, right? And I think that's the formula for success. I think we can break through in seats in Ontario, in New Brunswick, even in Quebec. I think that there are seats we can break through in there. And then BC, especially here where I live on Vancouver Island, is a huge opportunity for the Greens. People are tired of the same old politics. They're looking for change. And I'm very excited about the prospects for the next election.
Let me challenge you, if I could, for a second on that. You know, you got, the Green Party got in the last election about as many votes, not quite, but about as many votes as the Bloc Québécois got. They got 40-something seats, dominated one province, and you got, you know, just a few. Some people think that you should become a party of, you know, Vancouver and Vancouver Island and Atlantic Canada, and that's it. And if you focused on, you know, less than 100 seats, you might have a good chance of getting 40 to 50 of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. We have to focus our resources. We are a very small party. We don't have the money of the Liberals and the Conservatives. And so you're right, actually. I think we do need to concentrate our resources in seats that are winnable. Seats like Kitchener Centre and Guelph. And, you know, there are quite a few seats in Ontario where I think we can break through. You mentioned New Brunswick. I think you're right on that too. We broke through last time with Jenica Atwin winning in Fredericton. I think there are a couple of other seats we can win as well if we campaign well. We need a fully bilingual leader, which is what I offer, perfectly bilingual, able to campaign on the doorsteps in English and French. We need a leader who can win in the French debates, something I believe I can do. And we need somebody, I believe, who can break through in BC as well. You're right. Vancouver Island is a huge place of strength. We only have 1 seat on Vancouver Island. We should have 4 or 5. There are 7 seats here on this island. We should be able to win a majority of those seats. So I think there is a pathway to breaking through. We may not form a majority in the next election, I'll grant you that, Brian, but I do think that if we have the right kind of leadership, we can break through.
What's the solution to us meeting our climate change targets?
Key thing is transforming how our economy works. We're powered by fossil fuels. We need to be powered by renewables, and it's doable. Like in my own riding here in Esquimalt-Saint-Estève, we have the Sauk First Nation entirely off diesel generators, entirely onto solar. They're putting power back into the grid here in BC. And you know what? It rains quite a bit here where I live, and yet they're doing it. Power, solar, geothermal, wind, run-of-river hydro. We know the solutions. This is not an engineering problem. What the problem is a total lack of political will from the federal Liberals on what to do next, how to change our economy. The other thing I say is we have to do this in a way that leaves no one behind. Guaranteed livable income has been our platform since we were founded in '83. And, you know, we're seeing with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit right now, Justin Trudeau walking out to the microphone every morning, patching up the holes in this safety net. If we had gone with a guaranteed livable income, it would have been cheaper, more universal, more fair, easier to administer, much less bureaucracy and red tape. That's the kind of thing we're offering in the next campaign.
We've effectively almost had that with the COVID-19 payments, haven't we? We've sort of experienced for the first time a guaranteed annual income.
You're exactly right. It's almost like the policy work has been done for us. And, you know, I was really surprised the Liberals just didn't jump on it at the start of the pandemic and said, hey, we're going to take credit for this idea. We're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. It's cheaper, more efficient, way more universal. And they missed the boat on that. And now they're trying to patch it up by giving money to university students and, you know, small business and renters in this patchwork quilt of programs. And what we need, we don't need a patchwork quilt. What we need is a universal, fair, guaranteed livable income, which has one bureaucracy around it, not 10.
Some people think that when you vote for the NDP or the Green, all you're doing is helping to elect right-wing conservative governments.
Yeah, that's a real problem we have. And you see that in our votes, especially, the last 2 weeks of the campaign, we're up at 10, 15% in the polls, and then we start to slide because people say, I'm scared of the conservatives. It's a fair point. One of the things we need to do is become much better on the ground. We need to have a real ground game with people out door knocking and phoning and doing all the basics of politics. Barack Obama said 90% of politics is perspiration and 10% is inspiration. We need more perspiration on the ground. So that's a big part of it. So people see us as a credible party. The other thing is we need a credible leader, somebody who can really campaign in both languages, who connects with Canadians on the issues Canadians care about, right? And so I see our messaging has to be hopeful, kind of that Jack Layton, hope over fear kind of messaging. We're not just a one-issue party. We're not just about the environment. That is core because the future of human civilization is at risk. So it is key to us. But we have a hopeful bunch of solutions that make a ton of sense, that are fully costed. We know how we're going to pay for them. And that's the kind of, I hope, message that connects with Canadians.
I think Bernie Sanders had more impact on sort of American policy thinking when he ran, even though he was a social democrat, for the Democratic Party leadership than he ever did when he was an independent social democrat. Why not rejoin the Liberal Party and try to exact the changes that you're talking about, but within a party that can actually win government?
Yeah, I've been wondering that myself. And a lot of my old Liberal friends have said to me, you're crazy to leave the Liberals. Why would you ever leave? We're in majority government territory. We're going to win the next election. You should stick with the Liberals. I worked inside the Liberals for 30 years. I started as a university student, like I mentioned earlier. And I know that party inside and out. And it's just not going to come around. It's not going to move fast enough. Trudeau campaigned. I campaigned as a Liberal candidate in 2015 on cutting all fossil fuel subsidies. Now Canada has more fossil fuel subsidies per capita than any other country in the G7, the largest economies in the world. I mean, the Liberal Party has totally lost its way. It's sold out. And you look at these ethics scandals year after year. We're in the middle of one right now. Bill Morneau might lose his job. Why would I go back to that? I mean, it is a disaster area right now. What I say to the Liberals, come over to the party of ethics and integrity. That's what the Greens are at their core. Our 6 core values are all about, ecological wisdom, sustainability, participatory democracy. We're not a top-down party like the Liberals. There are so many reasons for Liberals to come over. I invite all the Liberals listening to this to come on over to the Greens.
I got to believe that some of the reason why you've had that policy change within the Liberal Party is because of the conservative victories in Alberta and Saskatchewan and the importance of those fossil fuel companies to the economies of Alberta and Saskatchewan. What would be your response to residents of Alberta and Saskatchewan when they're clearly, not voting Green, not voting Liberal, voting Conservative?
Yeah, you may be surprised to hear this, but I was born in Edmonton. I have a daughter at Calgary Foothills Hospital, a first-year doctor there. Lots of cousins in Alberta and Saskatchewan, so I totally get where that question is coming from. And my answer is, I have to be able to convince my cousins, my own family members, that it makes sense to vote Green, because we have a serious game plan for how to transform the economy, and they're part of the plan. We're not going to let anybody sink below the safety net. We have a guaranteed livable income, cost it out. We know how we're going to pay for it. We have a tuition plan, a free tuition for trade school, college, and university to help people upgrade their skills. Like my cousin, the welder in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, can go to Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. We'll cover his costs. So now that he's welding on pipelines, let's help him weld on geothermal projects, on solar projects, on wind projects, right? He's a fantastic welder, and we have a game plan for him to get into the new economy. People are disinvesting from fossil fuels like crazy. The big companies are getting out. Total and the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is out of fossil fuels, right? So we need a game plan to get into the new economy. And the Greens are the only party that's thinking this way. So that's what I'd say to my cousin and the other Albertans and people in Saskatchewan. We have a serious game plan. It's costed out. And by the way, we're going to get back to balanced budget, kind of like the Conservatives. A lot of people don't know this about the Greens, but we're really careful about how we spend taxpayer money and how we get back to balanced budgets over time. David, I think that'll resonate with my cousins and my daughter.
I appreciate you joining us, David. If people want to join the Green Party and vote for you, how do they do that?
I love that question. Go to davidmerner.com. click on join the party. And even better yet, Brian, if some of your listeners would click on the donate button, I would just love that too.
Well,
davidmurner.com.
Congratulations and good luck. And anytime you want to talk some policy issues as you go through the campaign, give me a call.
I would love to do that. I really appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you.
That's David Murner, a candidate for the leader of the Green Party in Canada. So just stay with us, and we're going to come back with some other candidates for the Green Party in just a minute. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, that was an interesting conversation with one of the candidates for the Green Party. We're now joined by another candidate, Annemie Paul. She's a Canadian civic engagement activist and human rights lawyer. She's worked on increasing diversity in government roles and supporting social innovation. She was a candidate in the 2019 federal election and is also running to be the Green Party of Canada leader. How are you? Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. It's always interesting to hear yourself described. I'm a civic engagement activist.
Well, is that not correct?
Well, no, it absolutely. You know, I certainly hope that anyone running for the leadership of the Green Party is someone that considers them to be themselves to be a civic engagement activist. Perhaps that's referring to the time that I founded and directed the Canadian Centre for Political Leadership, and we were focused on increasing the representation of underrepresented groups in Canadian politics. So I'm guessing it's that.
Fantastic. And where did you run in the last election?
So I ran in Toronto Centre. I ran against the incumbent in that riding was the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau.
And what do you think is going to happen to him?
I do not know. I do not know. You know, where I see the process is playing out in committee, and there is still a lot of unanswered questions. I look forward to seeing that whole process unfold. It looks like it's consuming, unfortunately, quite a lot of attention, and certainly that really needs to be directed towards other things. There's still a lot of Canadians that are suffering and still don't have a social safety net that's helping see them through this crisis. So hopefully we'll get away from these distractions and back to those urgent needs as soon as possible.
Toronto Centre is a particularly challenging riding to win, is it not? It goes all the way from the lake up to above Bloor Street. It's got, I think, some of the most high-end homes in all of Toronto at the north end and some pretty impoverished areas in the middle. Why pick that riding?
Well, you're right. It's really a microcosm of a riding. It's the smallest riding in Toronto. It doesn't quite go all the way to the lake. It ends at the Esplanade. You know, I was born in the old Toronto Centre, and my mother started her teaching career in the schools there. My grandmother worked as a nurse's aide in the hospitals there. And it's a place where if you can convincingly convey the message of a party there, then you pretty much can anywhere. And I really also wanted to run in a place where you could see how many urgent changes were needed. And I thought, as I do now, that the Green Party was offering the very best solutions on things like affordability, the climate emergency, of course, but also other very local things like safety. You know, it has some of the worst crime statistics in all of Toronto. And I'm always trying to look for the places where I can be part of the solution.
It's been a Liberal stronghold for a long time, has it not?
Indeed, it has, yes.
Can the Greens win there?
Of course, we can win anywhere. You know, we're at the stage now where I believe that particularly in the next couple of months, that people in Canada, many of whom have said very clearly that they do not want to go back to the way things were, that we are all waking up and realizing how many parts of our social safety net just simply are not working for people. We just don't want to go back to that. We don't ever want to be in the situation again where so many people wake up one day and find themselves without a job, without a source of revenue, and perhaps with parents in long-term care homes or other disabled people in long-term care homes and worrying about whether it's a death sentence. So this is the time when parties like ours, who have been talking about these things for a very, very long time, this is when we have the chance to say to people in Canada, look, take a look at our policies. We've been talking about these a long time. We have really good proposals. And if you don't want to go back, then you don't choose the same leadership again. We're the best option, I believe, under the circumstances.
Your website says that one of your major planks is that you are the party of democratic renewal. What do you intend to do to change our democratic electoral system?
Well, I believe very strongly that people are not failing the system. It's the other way around. The system is failing people. When we talk about things like voter apathy or the lack of engagement of young people, I definitely don't see that in my day-to-day life. In our campaign, there are many, many young people who are involved, many people from various walks of life, but it's hard to get people excited about a system that they feel is rigged against them and isn't going to represent their voice. If you can get elected with a majority government with only about a third of the people in the country voting for you, then there's something wrong. And so we need to be looking at the ways that we can get people excited about democracy again, the way that we can redesign it so that people feel more engaged and they want to come out to vote and they want to get involved in many other ways. And what I'm proposing and the Green Party is proposing is to look at a series of measures, things like proportional representation, the voting age, et cetera, in order to get people, reinvigorated and re-excited about the system.
Well, proportional representation I've heard about lots of times, but voting age, what do you want to do that?
Well, we want to explore what other countries have, which is what is the right age? What is the appropriate age for people in Canada to start voting? We know that the earlier citizens get involved in voting in a formal, structured way, the more likely they are to engage with the system for the whole rest of their lives. There are many things that people can do at 16. And we also know that being 16 in 2020 is not the same as it was as being 16 in 1920. And so, one of the things that we want to explore is whether we should be making adjustments to the voting age, lowering it so that young people can get engaged in the system earlier, and hopefully we'll get a better voter turnout. But I wouldn't prejudge that, just to stress it. I'm not advocating for any particular position. What I want to see is us having a really robust national discussion about that and several other measures that in other countries have worked for democratic renewal and might or might not work here.
Why not advocate it? Because the very next plank on your website says that you want to be the party of daring, which sort of sounds like Obama's audacity word. And, why not come out and say, I'm going to reduce the voting age to 16? That would be daring.
It would be daring, but I'm also one of the other planks in again, it's not a platform, but our vision is democratic. And so we can't forget about that. We are a party of evidence-based, very innovative policy. I'm all for that. You need to bring people along with you, and you need to make sure that people are consulted. So if you're talking about any major structural changes in how our democracy functions, then you want to make sure that you do it in the most democratic way possible. And so it's absolutely possible to have change, but to do it in a way that people feel consulted and included.
Elizabeth May, some people think, is sort of the Green Party of Canada. How are you going to live in her footsteps?
Well, Elizabeth is absolutely, there are no sufficient number of words to thank Elizabeth for all that she's done for the party. The party has, I think it was about 3,000 members when she first ran. I think it was 6,000 by the end of the race, and now we have over 24,000. And we have 3 seats in Parliament. And so we have a lot to thank her for. Any new leader has to carve out their own path, obviously with respect for the work that's being done before them. And in the case of the Green Party, the leader really is a spokesperson for the membership and their policies. And so this is a time for renewal in the Green Party in many, many ways. We have new federal council members. We have a new leader that's coming in, and we also have our policy convention this year. And so this is a time for us to think about where do we want to go next, building on the past, but definitely carving out not a new direction, but having a renewed pathway to the future.
My best friend worked for you in the last election, a gentleman by the name of Steve Cox. I'm not sure if
Oh, yes.
you met him. He was encouraging me to come to a fundraiser for you at one specific time.
That's great.
And we had lots of arguments about the sense of voting for the Green Party. And I argued that strategic voting was key because a vote for the Green Party in too many places was just a vote for the Conservative Party. What do you say to that?
I believe that people should vote the way that their conscience and their common sense is telling them to vote. I've had the really good fortune, Ryan, of living in different countries. I had the chance to work abroad and even work for Canadians abroad in global affairs. And I've actually lived in countries where Greens have made breakthroughs, or living close to countries where Greens made breakthroughs. And it really took people just saying, again, they're not going to keep voting, even with all of those strategic considerations in mind, even with their usual voting habits. They just said, if we want something different, we're going to need to make different choices. It's usually around the time of a disruption, a major disruption. And for the most part, they're quite happy with those choices that they've made. And so I really believe that this is the time that Canadians are going to be looking at our current situation and making the same calculations. And, that we do need some kind of disruption like that to make the breakthrough. And I think that the pandemic and the climate emergency, these are exactly the kind of conditions where Green parties have made breakthroughs in other countries.
The Green Party obviously tries to be a national party and runs candidates in every riding across the country and competes across the country. But you got almost the same number of votes as the Bloc Québécois, and you won just a handful of seats. And the Bloc Québécois, because they focused only on Quebec, obviously, with the same number of votes, gets like 40 seats. Have you got the right strategy? Why don't you just focus on Atlantic Canada, maybe, urban Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Vancouver Island?
Well, first of all, I think that you summarized in a nutshell the problems with our existing electoral system. How is it that we receive the same number of votes as the Bloc, and we only end up with 3 seats, and they end up with significantly more? I think that helped. That's a very neat way of explaining the problem that we have. But even in the system that exists, and even if it exists for the foreseeable future, what we believe, and certainly what I believe, is that people in Canada have should have the opportunity to vote for Greens wherever they live. And we certainly wouldn't ever want to arrive at the point that we are so strategic about our thinking that we forget that. And so we are going to continue to run Greens across the country in all of our ridings. Fredericton, I would say that wasn't expected to be a breakthrough riding for us, and yet there it was. And that can happen anywhere. So no, we are a national party. We want to give people the opportunity to vote for us wherever they are. And so we're going to keep running candidates across the country.
What do you think is going to happen to your riding, to downtown Toronto, both from a residential standpoint as well as from a commercial office employment standpoint because of COVID-19? And is that positive for the economy or negative to the economy?
Well, just to emphasize, it's not my riding. There's sometimes this proprietary, and I guess understandably so, you become very attached. And I became very attached to the volunteers, to the riding association, to the people in the community. And you always ideally want to have that connection. But the moment that the election was over, I no longer had any dibs on that riding. And so, and that's the case for all of the people who ran in the last election. But this period is a very, very fragile moment for Toronto Centre. There are many large pockets of low-income people who work in precarious work in that riding. They were struggling before, and this is exactly the kind of thing that could push them over the edge. There are also affordability issues in terms of housing as well. The cities are on their knees. The cities were already struggling, and the pandemic has made a bad situation worse. And of course, many of the services that people rely on in Toronto Centre are provided at the municipal level. And so what I'm personally looking to see, and I think everyone should be looking to see, is how well can the various levels of government cooperate together, How well can they share resources to make sure that no one falls through the cracks, regardless of jurisdiction. I don't want to see anyone fighting over jurisdiction when it comes to meeting these urgent needs of people.
But are people going to be less interested in living in high-rise condominiums and going to work in high-rise office buildings in downtown Toronto and going on GO trains and subways that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to physically distance?
Well, we at the moment there aren't alternatives to that. You know, we have through the lack of urban planning and the lack of investment in the areas outside of our cities, and the lack of building, you know, critical infrastructure like transportation hubs. We've made it very difficult for people to have full and complete lives if they aren't in the center. If you're out of the center, you often have to travel in for work, for instance. And again, it certainly doesn't have to be this way. And this is one of the things that I bring to the contest, for instance. I have the comparative knowledge of living in places where people can actually work outside of the city center very successfully. So this is really a moment for us to it's a great question that you ask. We really need to be thinking about how can we make the investments with these hundreds of billions of dollars that we're going to be spending over the next few years. How can we use that money best in order to change that, in order to make other communities outside of the urban centers thrive, allow people to live in a different and a more sustainable way. And for the moment, there really is no option for most people if they're going to work than to do things the way that they've been doing. And I'm sure there are many people that are just incredibly stressed about it.
You've mentioned a few times now some of your international experience. Where have you worked internationally?
So I began working in global affairs in the Canadian mission to the European Union in Brussels. And I also worked at the International Criminal Court in the Office of the Prosecutor. I also worked as the EU Director for an international conflict prevention NGO. And I founded an innovation hub in Barcelona, Spain, that serves as a catalyst for relatively new international NGOs working on global challenges.
Fascinating. That's a great experience.
It is, and nice places to live too.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, one of the big challenges that Canada has right now, and I think the Liberal Party is facing, is Alberta and Saskatchewan, that has been, you know, so focused on the fossil fuel industry. The Green Party obviously has voted against Kinder Morgan, has been big environmentally focused. What would be your response to fossil fuel, to oil companies, to natural gas companies, to people that are working in the fossil fuel business in Alberta, Saskatchewan?
Well, the first thing that we all bring our own experiences to our policies and to the race, and actually that's one of the reasons why it's really so important to have diverse representation in politics. My story is that my brother, until he was laid off just a little while ago, was working as a roughneck in the oil patch in Alberta. And so when I think about this, it's very personal. And when I say that I care about the future of fossil fuel workers, you can believe me when I say that. And what I'm focused on is making sure that there is a future for people like him and the people who he's worked on his crews, that gives them a proper, well-paying job of the future. It's a sector that's in decline, and it's in an irreversible decline. And so again, when we think about where are we going to be spending all of this money that we're going to be investing, when we get to the point of talking about stimulus for the economy as opposed to emergency, I want to see it being spent on sectors where we can create sustainable, high-paying jobs like renewable energies, building infrastructure, retrofitting buildings. Those are all things that people who work in the oil patch are really suited to do on day one. And then more than anything, we just absolutely can't forget that we're talking about people and communities. They need to be involved in the decisions. Nothing can be imposed on anyone. We need to let them know that we care, and we need to let them know, I think, that we are going to make our breakthrough out on the prairies, for instance, when people out there are convinced that we have the very best plan for their future. So that's what I want to see our party doing, showing that we care and showing that we have the very best plan for the future.
I've done a bunch of shows with people post the incident in Minneapolis a couple months ago and the protests across both the United States and some in Canada. You obviously, and a lot of people have talked about the lack of examples of people that have been able to break through and be very successful is one of the challenges of growing up Black in Canada today. You've obviously got a great education. You've had international experience. You've been quite successful. Why have you been successful when it's challenging for so many others? And have you actually encountered racism in your career?
The answer to the second part of your question is certainly. It's not something that you can escape. I've encountered racism and anti-Semitism in the context of this race. I'm Black. I'm also Jewish, and so in both of those identities have been attacked at different times during this race. So these things are really live issues. In my case, it's
Can I ask how?
Sorry.
How is your race and your
usual
religion attacked?
Yeah, the usual, the social media, which is something I really had never been engaged with before running in the last election. I'd never had any social media accounts. There are regular postings that just the usual slurs, and we had slurs in the last that were posted in the chat during our last debate as well. Some directed at me, some directed at other candidates. And so it's something that you never get comfortable with, but you just try not to let distract you too much during the race. In terms of me, I can't really answer that. I don't think that there's anything, one thing or any particular thing that I could point to that allowed me to succeed where people in exactly the same circumstances did not. My mother was a really great example. Perhaps that's something. She came to Canada. She had to work for several years as a live-in housekeeper. That was the only way that she could come to Canada, even though she was a teacher. She had to start all over. She got her bachelor's again and became a teacher in the schools here, and then went back to school with 4 kids under the age of 12 to get her master's degree. And so I guess I don't feel that extraordinary when I think of everything that she managed. And she taught full time while she did all of that. So
What do you think
I'm nothing special.
To race relations in Canada is?
Sorry?
What do you think the solution to race relations in Canada is?
A big part of the solution to race relations in Canada is to have more diversity in the room when we're taking policy decisions that can either help race relations or harm them. It's very hard to develop a great policy around criminal justice, for instance, when we know that Black and Indigenous peoples are hugely overrepresented in the criminal justice system without having Black and Indigenous people participating in developing those policies. One of the reasons I'm such a big fan of diversity is because during my studies, I did a lot of work on that, and the research just tells us very clearly, whether it's the boardroom or whether it's parliament, that when you have diverse perspectives at the table, that it actually creates better dividends for shareholders and better public policy for the public. So if we're talking about race relations, one of the big problems is often the people who are most impacted by systemic racism, for instance, aren't in the room when the policies are developed. So I would start with that.
If people are motivated by this conversation and want to help you out, how do they join the Green Party and vote for you?
Excellent question, and let me answer that. So I encourage people to visit our website, which is annemiepaul.ca, and you can see my name there at the bottom. You have all the information that you need about my policies, about our campaign, about our vision. You can also sign up to vote. If you're signing up to vote, September 3rd is the deadline to do that. We really encourage you to do it. We're trying to make some history here. And the link is the same if you'd like to make a donation. We always love to hear from people. We really want the Green Party to attract a lot of new people throughout the race. So everyone's welcome to join and to contact us, and I'd love to hear from them.
Annemiek Paul, candidate for leader of the Green Party, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. We're going to take a break and come back with another candidate for the leadership of the Green Party in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We've now heard from two candidates for the Green Party leadership, and we're going to hear now from a third. Dr. Courtney, I apologize. Dr. Courtney Howard is a contestant for the Green Party leadership. She is coming to us right now from Yellowknife, and it's interesting. She's an emergency physician in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and also a clinical associate professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Calgary. She worked for Doctors Without Borders. I can't pronounce the French version of that. I apologize. And she's also served in majority Indigenous community in Canada's Arctic and subarctic. She worked for Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change and done research on menstrual cups, wildfires, eco-anxiety, and eco-grief. So it's going to be interesting to hear about some of that. And she's the first female president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. Doctor, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm very well. Thanks for having me, Brian.
So why are you running with that resume and all those incredible experiences for leadership of the Green Party of Canada?
Good question. And actually, politics wasn't something that I had in my sights really at all until the pandemic started. But the goal of most of my work over the last 5 to 10 years outside of the emergency department has been to try to get evidence-based policy implemented in order to come up with a response to climate change that protects the health of today's children, because the World Health Organization has been saying for some time now that climate change is the biggest health threat of the 21st century. And the Lancet Countdown, which, as you mentioned, I worked for, has pointed out all of the health opportunities inherent in climate action in terms of decreasing air pollution, reducing asthma exacerbations right now if we switch to electric vehicles and that type of thing. And so I've done a lot of research to create some of that data. I've put a lot of policy reports together. I've met with lots of cabinet ministers and helped to explain the links. But then you hit a situation like COVID, and all of a sudden it becomes very, very clear that the limiting factor in terms of getting evidence-based policy implemented is in fact politics. And so now we're at this moment of tremendous instability, and we are going to end up spending a lot of public money one way or the other. And so I entered politics in order to be able to influence that towards a healthy recovery, because essentially this is the exact time window where we need to be making those low carbon decisions that set us on the path for a healthy future.
Have you been involved in politics or the Green Party previously?
Not really. I have been very opportunistic about my involvement with politics in the past. I was a locum physician for a while in Canada, and so I actually just tended to, wherever I was when an election was called, I would volunteer for the candidate who seemed to be the most likely to get elected and have good climate policy. So I have volunteered for the Liberals. I volunteered for the Greens at one point. I actually joined the Conservative Party at one point to try to vote for a leader who had good climate policy. And at this moment, I believe the Green Party, I did, yeah.
Had good climate policy? That's sacrilege within the Green Party, I thought.
Well, there was a candidate who was in favor of carbon pricing. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, if someone is willing to put carbon pricing in their platform, I will join the Conservative Party to vote for them. And I did.
Who's that? And out of interest, who is that?
I believe it was Michael Chong.
Okay.
It was a little while ago. But yeah, I figure let's intervene in the democratic process wherever we have the opportunity to do it. And in this situation, we now have, a variety of political parties, but the Green Party is at a moment of transition itself, and it can very much become the party, the evidence-based, values-driven, action-oriented party of planetary health.
So I just interviewed someone from Toronto Centre, downtown Toronto, and I guess I would have thought intuitively someone from downtown Toronto and climate change makes a lot of sense. But someone from Yellowknife and climate change? Why are you so motivated living in Yellowknife?
We're melting.
You're melting.
We're melting. We are ground zero of climate change. We are one of the most rapidly warming places in the world. So I actually live on a permafrost hill. And I can tell you that when you live on a permafrost hill, you become very, very attuned to climate change. I cannot tell you how many thousands of dollars I've spent on my foundation. And this is, in fact, not even the warmest part of the north. I work in the home of the most northerly CT scanner in the middle part of Canada. So that means that if somebody bonks their head up in Inuvik and needs a CT scan, they come down and see me in our emergency department. So I've sutured up a lot of head lacerations for people that bonk their head in the high Arctic. And they're actually already 3 degrees Celsius warmer than they were when an 80-year-old elder was born. So you can imagine this is a world that is built on ice in terms of lifestyle. So the ice roads are forming later, they're breaking up earlier, people are more likely to go through the ice and sustain a trauma. The rapidly changing landscape is leading to landslides that are very disconcerting. You can imagine if you grew up somewhere and all of a sudden it looks very different. So there's mental health impacts, food security impacts, and really cultural impacts as an entire way of life is threatened. So in fact, we are really the small island states of Canada. As a circumpolar nation, really, there is I haven't met a climate denier since I moved to the north because it's just so much part of life.
So obvious. I checked out your website, and right in big bold letters at the top of it is, what is planetary health? Tell me, please, what is planetary health?
That's one of my favorite topics. So planetary health was defined by The Lancet, which is one of the world's most prestigious medical journals, in 2015 as the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems upon which it depends. So it really articulates this concept where the ecological determinants of health, things like soil, climate, water, really form the stable underpinning that we need if we want to then build things like an economic system or a social system that allow us to have the social determinants of health input into our lives. So education, income, different cultural factors. Really, in order for us to build the world that we want to live in, we need to be able to depend on our foundation. In order for me to work in a hospital, when you think about everything that goes into that, I think COVID has really laid bare the importance of things like supply chains. I've worked in lower income settings overseas where I would sometimes go to the cupboard and, the pharmaceutical cupboard was a little bit bare, and it's not fun to work as a doctor when you don't have the tools you need. So when we look at everything that's required for us to have health in society, really it all starts with a stable planet. And so planetary health is a place where different disciplines convene in order to do the multidisciplinary work of solving those problems in a way that essentially solves more than one issue at once, which is something you can do when you're talking to one another well.
You've mentioned evidence-based scientific decision-making a few times, and I guess COVID-19 has given me some encouragement that people actually might pay attention to that and listen to that and prefer that, where, we've had Tony Fauci in the United States with 80% popularity, and the president with plummeting popularity. We've seen Canada really follow in a lot of ways some evidence-based decision-making, scientific decision-making, and has 1/5 the per capita incidence of the United States, which obviously in some places hasn't. Some people think Premier Doug Ford in Ontario might have taken a different route, but he has sort of listened to the scientists. Do you think that we've got almost a once in a lifetime opportunity to really have scientific evidence-based decision-making come to the forefront?
That's why I'm entering politics. Yes. I think that COVID has shown us that crisis is awful. It is destabilizing, it's anxiety provoking, it puts us in a position where our entire lives are thrown up into the air and we watch the pieces scatter down, we're grieving. And so as someone who's worked on climate for a long time, we used to be in a position where we were trying to say, hey guys, like bad things are going to happen, and trying to actually help people imagine what that world could look like. I did the first policy brief between Doctors Without Borders and the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. So I've been very involved in the humanitarian discussions around climate change. So we're talking malnutrition emergencies, conflict, migration, things that do have the possibility to lead to an increasing number of failed states and disrupted supply chains and complete disruption of the world we believe we know. And now I don't have to describe what a world like that feels like because we're all kind of living it right now. So there's in fact a huge movement worldwide. I have taken a leave of absence from a position as the head of advocacy for the World Health Organization, civil society working group on climate change and health in order to do this. And the last initiative I was part of before doing that was to create a sign-on letter addressed to G20 leaders that ended up getting signed by organizations representing 40 million healthcare professionals worldwide. That's 2/3 of the world's global healthcare professionals, saying, hey, G20 leaders, we are the people who have been taking care of health during this planetary health crisis of COVID, because it is a zoonotic disease after all. And we do not want a lifetime of repeated health crises. And in order to prevent that, which are going to happen as a result of climate change, if we don't get onto a low emissions path, we need you to use this money, this public money we know we're all going to have to put into this right now in a low carbon way, so that we can keep our kids safe and prevent a future of repetitive health crises.
Let me change topics if I could for a second. I've done a bunch of interviews with people on race relations after the incidents in Minneapolis a couple months ago. Several people have mentioned that, yeah, we have an issue with Black Canadians, African Canadians, but our issue is even bigger with the way we treat Indigenous people. You've probably got a very unique view on that issue living in Yellowknife. Can you tell me what you think the problem is in regards to how we treat Indigenous people and what the solutions are?
Well, we have this immense colonial history. We were actually just preparing, there's a debate on Northern issues. So I had two members of my team, Bob Bromley and Garth Walbridge, here on my patio about an hour ago. And Garth,
are there patios in Yellowknife? I'm glad to hear that.
There are. Mine's up high, so the mosquitoes can't get us, which is amazing. But Garth, really emphasized again that it's—
Sorry, I apologize. I have to interrupt. That's interesting. So if you raise the height of a patio, the mosquitoes can't get you?
They seek flesh lower down for the most part.
It is better. My patio. Thank you for that.
I didn't actually know that either when we bought the house, but the real estate was like, he was like, you'll love it. They won't find you up here. And so it wasn't wisdom on my part that resulted in this patio. We just kind of lucked into it, but it's amazing. But in any case, Garth was reminding us that, Indigenous peoples of Canada represent a tremendous number of varied peoples, all of whom have a different history, different cultures, different views. But when we look at, our overall national sort of approach, it has been tremendously colonial. And certainly as a emergency doctor here in Yellowknife, the impact of residential schools on people, now it cannot be overstated in terms of the trauma it has caused to, first generation people, second generation people, third generation people. It is a factor in every shift that I work. And so we know that it's not going to solve itself in one generation. It is going to take us generations of work, of good faith listening and of working in partnership and making sure that we live up to our promises. So we've committed as a nation to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We need to make sure that we bring that home and we align it with our laws. We pass legislation to make sure that that is implemented here. We need to implement all of the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what I think gets lost sometimes in the conversation, and this is a little bit where planetary health can help, is that a lot of the approach to life that Indigenous peoples bring to the table is what we need to bring into our broader society in order to kind of save our skins at this moment in time. So, the thought of, a relationship with the land, respect for water as a bringer of life, respect for other animals, healing systems that take the whole person into account instead of having this really narrow biomedical model in which I was trained, which I think brings a lot to the table, but, does miss out on aspects of things. I think we know that areas stewarded by Indigenous peoples do better in terms of biodiversity than a lot of park systems that are created in other ways. So I think that what I love about Yellowknife is it's a place of, I think, a really productive interaction between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And in fact, my interactions with elders like Francois Paulette and Vessa Blondin has completely informed my approach to planetary health. And I think that the more we can, bring some of that wisdom and marry it to the wisdom of the traditional Western scientific method, the better we're going to all do together. And so there's resilience, there's wisdom that we stand to benefit by bringing Indigenous ways more wholly into Canadian society in a partnership type of arrangement as opposed to a colonial arrangement.
You've been involved with the WHO, Doctors Without Borders. Seems like you've traveled and worked in a lot of places. What attracts you to Yellowknife?
My husband's a pediatrician, and we both liked work overseas. Essentially, I like to work where I can have an impact. I want to know that I am working where I can do the most good per hour invested. And this is a place where people need help. They need stable physicians. You probably heard lots about docs, rural places having trouble finding doctors. My husband is I just going to brag for a second, he's an excellent pediatrician. And some of the kids in the high Arctic are the sickest kids in Canada. Canadian peds ICUs are full of little Inuit babies with bronchiolitis in the winters. And so he's the person who stabilizes them. It allows us to provide high quality care to a relatively underserved population. And as it happens, I delivered my children here. We're part of the community, and now this is home.
You've never run for the Green Party, for a political party. How do you think you can win?
Well, I have a good team, for one thing, but really this is very much a party in transition. And I was looking at the slate of candidates before announcing. I needed to wait until we had the first wave of the pandemic relatively under control in the Northwest Territories before I felt like I could put my name forward. And we did. And really, there's so much evidence that shows that looking at climate change in terms of health is the best way to motivate populations to take action. I've worked with some of the world's best climate change communications researchers, and that's what all of the data says. And in fact, it's been my experience as well. When we talk about climate change, about the polar bears, there aren't too many people who are going to change their behavior for a polar bear on a Tuesday. Like, are you going to wake up on a Tuesday and do something different on behalf of a polar bear? Probably not. But will you do something different on a Tuesday if you're thinking about the smoke that your kids are likely to breathe because of wildfires every summer? If we don't get ourselves onto a low emissions pathway, are you going to change your behavior because of the food they're going to eat? Are you going to change your behavior just to put more trees in your city center so you're cooler in the summertime and your property prices go up? There's ways that speaking about climate change in terms of people's health just resonates much more on a felt experience level. And I'm really one of Canada's and the world's most well-known communicators on that topic. So at this particular moment where we're living a planetary health emergency, and I'm feeling this huge degree of anxiety in my patients, and I'm seeing it in the world, I think people are looking for just the best solutions. And that's what Evident provides us with. People keep asking me, are you left, are you right? I am for what works. I am for maximizing overall health now and into the future. And my platform lays it all out in terms of social determinants of health and ecological determinants of health, because we've done tons of studies. We know what works. We just need to implement it. So I'm for evidence. I'm for action. I'm an emerge doc. I manage crises for a living. That's why I'm putting my name forward now. And so far that message is resonating.
Well, I have been very impressed chatting with you. I hope you do well, and I encourage you to reach back out and talk to us again. Let me ask you as a closing comment, given your experience as emergency room doctor, thinking about COVID-19, do you have a message for anyone that's listening?
I would say to know that you're not alone if you're feeling really vulnerable and worried. That's very much how people are feeling as they enter my emergency department. And I think quarantine has led to different social reactions for a lot of us. And it's made us distance ourselves a little bit from one another in terms of how we interact. And I would just really encourage people to reach out, to recreate those communities very actively, virtually, because that's the support we need. We're all usually, if you think about, say you lose your job under normal circumstances, you've been rocked, but most of your support system hasn't. Right now, we've all been rocked all at the same time, and it's easy to kind of retreat. And I would just really, really encourage people to reach out, to be as kind and understanding as you can, and to be kind to yourself as well, because this is an unprecedented time for most of us, and it's normal to be feeling worried and a bit discomforted.
Dr. Courtney Howard, thanks for joining us on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Appreciate it.
Really pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Well, that was really interesting. We had to had the opportunity to talk to 3 different candidates for the Green Party leadership tonight. All very impressive backgrounds, all very impressive people. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this show, and I hope to get some of the other candidates on, is my experience is that the best time to get involved in politics, if you ever want to get involved in politics, is during leadership campaigns. The very first campaign I got involved with is 1972, when a cousin of mine, Bob Nixon, was running for leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario. And it was an incredible opportunity to get involved, get to meet people, understand policy, do campaign work. And in political campaigns, almost uniquely versus almost any other experience in life, you can get very involved at a young age or at any age and have a sizable impact. So, you know, if you got any interest, reach out to some of these people and get involved in their campaigns. Or if you've got interest in voting, join the Green Party and get involved. Or the Conservative Party that's also doing a leadership and get involved there. Or the Liberal Party, which who knows what's going to happen in the future. And so just number 1, get involved. And then I guess the other comment I would make would be something that each one of them talked about. Socially distancing is not the right language. We should be talking about physical distancing. We all need, in this time of COVID-19, where everyone's going through a little bit of some isolation issues, to reach out and touch people, albeit virtually and at 6 feet distance. Thanks. Good night. Well, good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, we've had an opportunity to meet 3 different candidates for the Green Party and leadership of the Green Party, and now we're going to meet a 4th. Her name is Miriam Haddad. She's an immigration lawyer. She's got really quite a compelling and interesting story. She came to Canada from Syria when she was just a young girl, and her parents both had engineering degrees, but couldn't get jobs in Canada, and ended up getting a job as a taxi driver and accounting clerk. Probably a story that so many immigrants have encountered when they came to Canada. Miriam has put herself through school, ended up having a fair amount of student debt. She's worked in a lot of different areas for the environment, for asylum seekers. She's fluent in Arabic. She's represented numerous different Canadians. And she ran for the Green Party in the last election and was the shadow cabinet person nominated by Elizabeth May for spokesperson on immigration in what the shadow cabinet would have been. She's now running for leader of the Green Party. So Miriam, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And why do you think you could be leader of the Green Party and potentially even Prime Minister of Canada?
Well, for many reasons. First of all, I have no baggage, so no scandals ongoing, and I have a stake in the game. I will live through climate change. I have a serious reason to want to fight it. We can't say the same for those who are in charge right now. And people talk about experience, but some of our most courageous leaders currently are new to politics, like AOC, for example. And we need leaders who are not career politicians, but who are compassionate and authentic, and who are ready to take on corporations and fight for people and for the planet. That being said, as you mentioned, I have been fighting. I actually have been fighting for social justice for the past 7 years in my job. I am an immigration lawyer, and I deal with some of the most difficult refugee claims, including stateless Palestinians. And I have a deep understanding on how Canada's system work, as well as other countries. And yeah, I specialize also in refugee claims from the Middle East, and I've represented a lot of LGBTQI folks also. Yeah. Why
LGBTIQ folks?
Well, it's an important matter to me. I am myself a lesbian, so it's part of the reason why I wanted to represent them. It's people from the Middle East also. The fact that they have in front of them somebody that understands what they go through and the marginalizations that they go through by being from within their community, it's something that mattered to me, and this is why I decided to represent them.
It's interesting that you referenced AOC. Not everyone may be familiar with who she is or what that stands for. Could you tell me who she is? And I have to tell you, I just saw a speech that she made, I think last night or the night before. It was pretty compelling. Are you Canada's AOC?
Sorry? I'm a big fan. Like I just think that as a Democrat, I think well, she's a socialist just like me.
Tell our listeners, if you could, who she is.
Well, she's American. She's just down the south of the border. She represents one of New York districts. If I'm not mistaken, it's which district is it? I don't know which district, but there's a specific district, and she's changing the politics in the U.S. And she's the one that wants to bring forward the Green New Deal, just like me in Canada, and yeah, and she's 1 year younger than me, and I mean she's doing politics differently, and she inspires younger generations. She inspires the millennials and the Zoomers, and I think she has a great future and she's going to change a lot of things in the U.S. Hopefully, and I see her becoming one day the president of the U.S.
And so, are you Canada's AOC?
Sorry?
Are you Canada's version of her?
Oh, well, is that what you mean? No, well, it's always nice to hear it. Like it's always nice to hear it. But I am myself, Miriam Haddad, and I am in Canada, and we.
Do you have a middle name?
No middle name for me.
We can't have 3 initials for you. I apologize. But
it's
MH. Canada's MH.
Go ahead. But I think that's it. But it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to hear it.
People have compared her or you to her.
Yeah, quite often. Yeah, I hear it. It's always very very nice to hear it, and she's an inspiration. Just like I said, I'm a big fan.
And so she has been associated with the Green New Deal, but she is also very associated with civil rights, with women's rights,
yes,
with lots of other, fairly progressive social issues. And my concern would be that the Green Party ends up being a one-issue party too often, doesn't it? How do you ensure that the Green Party is a social democratic kind of party rather than just the one-issue environmental party?
It's not a one issue. I don't agree with you that it's a one issue party. I just think that we weren't clear on what we stand for in the past. It's things that need to be. It's all about communications and how we ran our campaigns previously. But we are the party who has the most left-wing platform, policies that were voted by our members, and by having a slogan that was more of a centrist kind of slogan, we weren't clear on what we stand for. People think that we are a one-issue party, but it's really not the case. We had a full-costed platform. The platform and reading it was challenging, and this is maybe why not everybody knew what we stand for. But that's going to change if I become the leader of the Green Party of Canada.
When you've got 3 or 4 parties, maybe even more, competing in Quebec, can the Green Party break through in Quebec? Has the Green Party ever broken through in Quebec?
No, but I think we have a huge potential. There's a lot of socialist folks, and for a lot of people here, social justice is very important, and fighting climate change is super important. It goes hand in hand, and yeah, so there's a huge potential to elect Green MPs in Quebec, and I see it happening in the future.
Tell me what your answer to people that are employed in fossil fuel industries in Alberta and Saskatchewan is. They haven't voted Green, they haven't even voted Liberal. How do you answer their questions when they're saying, what about our jobs? What about our livelihoods? What about our families?
Well, that's the thing, and it's important to mention that it's like what we are offering is actually jobs for them, and we're bringing in some solutions to the fossil fuels that will end up. It's not a sustainable industry. It's not healthy for them to work in that field. So it's as long as we offer them a solution and they are sure 100% that we're pretty much how can I say that in a proper something that makes sense. It's just we are offering them solutions, and within a Green New Deal, there's going to be green federal jobs guaranteed that will be offered for them to transition. A just transition is a transition that takes into consideration the fossil fuel workers. And I am sure that there will not be left behind. And yeah, so this is what I'm advocating for. We need also to offer them classes and for them to make a choice if they want to go into another field, free education for them to go into another field. There's also a possibility for us. There's also the UBI, Universal Basic Income, that can come into place. And for them that want to retire or just go into a complete other field, or they want to open their own enterprises or open their own companies, well, at that point, they're going to be able to do so. So it's all part of a just transition that will be included in a Green New Deal.
Let me ask you how you make an appeal to Quebecers to vote for Green parties. In the last election, the Green Party got almost as many votes as the Bloc Québécois. The Bloc Québécois elected, I think it's 40-something members of parliament, and the Green Party 4 members of parliament. And so therefore, the argument that I would have if I was a voter in Quebec, I say, my vote is worth 10 times as much if I vote Bloc Québécois. It's worth 1/10 if I vote for Green, in the amount of MPs I can elect, in the amount of power I can impact. So, why would I vote Green when I could vote for the Bloc Québécois and get 10 times more power?
Well, we are much stronger we actually are the most credible party on climate action. And we are the most credible party on social justice. And as long as we have a leader who is bilingual, I am myself a francophone. So as long as we're able to communicate things that matter and in a very clear way, things that matter to Québécois, there's no reason why they wouldn't be voting for us. If there's somebody also, I'm a Québécoise, I'm a proud Québécoise, and by having a leader who comes from Quebec, it's another way of encouraging people to vote for us. But there is a huge potential of getting Green MPs elected in the House of Commons. Well,
good luck. I think that you come across incredibly well. Maybe you are Canada's version of what is it, AOC?
AOC. Yes.
Maybe you are Canada's version of AOC, and so I congratulate you for putting your name forward, and I look forward to following your campaign.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
And as the campaign progresses, if you want to talk to us about any policies in the future, just give us a call.
Oh, for sure, I will.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Take care.